Well, we call our property the Cane Creek Canyon Nature Preserve.
Our property is about 413 acres, and most of it is land that's relatively pristine down in the canyons, and only a small part of it is in fields up here around the house.
Well, our Treasure Forest Plan primary objective is recreation, and our secondary objective is education. Education and the idea of the preserve go together because we have numerous different microhabitats with rare species of plants that people travel hundreds of miles to see. And we like to show children and adults that those kinds of areas are worth preserving.
From the very beginning, we've had college classes out here. We've had graduate students doing projects. We've had school groups coming out, and we have sought to make the place accessible and usable by school groups.
We have about roughly 1,000 people a year who come to the preserve, and primarily in the springtime when the wildflowers are in bloom.
People will drive a long way to see a little plant we have here that's called French's Shooting Star, and it was first discovered here on this preserve in the late 1980s.
It's not a common plant anywhere. It's rare in all cases, wherever it's found.
This little plant here is ginseng, and it's been threatened throughout the Appalachian region by over-collecting because it's a valuable medicinal plant and has disappeared through a lot of the Appalachians. It's our plan to try to protect as many of these native species as we can because they're part of this diverse forest that we have around us, and hope that they'll be around for future generations to see.
What other threatened or endangered species do you have on the property?
Well, there are several native orchids that people come to see every year. We have a few tree species that are rare. We've got the American yellowwood and the butternut or white walnut that grows here. We've got American chestnuts, and the forest in these little canyons is extremely diverse. We have over 100 species of native trees that are found on the preserve. We have about 11 miles of hiking trails on the preserve that we have open to the public year-round. We have several campsites that we maintain, and people come and use, and they bring their kids out and get them used to the wilds of nature and use it as a way of training them to become comfortable with the outdoors. We became Treasure Forest during the mid-1990s, as I remember. And we were attracted to the program because we felt that we had something to offer. We were committed to managing our land in a thoughtful way. We've made plans that our preserve will be a preserve forever, and we think that this is a special little piece of the earth, and that we're intent on seeing that it is going to be available for future generations to enjoy and learn from.
Our primary objective on our property is timber, but wildlife is our secondary, but recreation is not far behind. None of the property that we have in the Treasure Forest was inherited. It's all property that we bought through time since we were married and moved back here to the area where we grew up. The property is made up of about 65% pines, both natural and artificial regeneration, probably 30% hardwood, and then maybe the remainder of that in wildlife openings, food plots, and areas that we have just left open in their natural state that we fertilize for native species to thrive for the wildlife. When we bought it, first thing we wanted to do was try to put it in something more productive.
On the first piece of property, we did all the work. Lamar used a tractor, and we had borrowed a pulpwood truck from his granddaddy and did all the work ourselves. And it was fun, but it was hard.
What's the range of ages of your pine trees you have?
Well, we just planted 55 acres of longleaf, and from there, probably 8 years old, up to this stand is probably right around 20, about 22, probably 22 years old, the range. Most of the other averages about 12 to 15 years of age. When we first bought the property, we started trying to manage for wildlife, and today, every piece of property we have, you can find turkey tracks, and you can find deer tracks, and the numbers have continued to grow. One thing that we try to do here in this area is have a variety of foods for the wildlife. We like to hunt, and we like to make pictures of the wildlife out here. I've got a camera that I keep out here pretty often, just looking at the different wildlife species we have. And the food plots are, I guess you'd say, more of a buffer or protection for years when you don't have a mass crop. Maybe the persimmon trees don't produce persimmons, or the oaks don't produce acorn crops. That's our main reason for doing the food plots, is just a supplemental feeding for the wildlife. When we purchased this piece of property, we also inherited this power line, transmission power line, and it part of the Alabama Power Company's transmission line is about 5 acres in this strip across here. So, you know, you've got it, you might as well use it to the best of your advantage, and what we tried to do is to use it for food plots and put as much forage out here as we can for the wildlife.
The recreational activities that we have on the property are fishing in our catfish pond and four-wheeling. We've got some trails that we use. Of course, the hunting that you mentioned, and just photography, and just enjoying being outdoors.
Education on the property has been an important part from the time I was teaching. I taught ag in the high schools for 23 years, and while I was teaching there, we used the property then. You know, we didn't have to ask permission to go on the property that I had. As the kids learned, I learned. I learned right with them, but I always stressed treasure forest. And at the same time, you know, there's an old saying you need to remember, practice what you preach, and that's pretty much what I tried to do when I was teaching. It's more than just owning property and saying you own property. It's owning that property and trying to make it better.
Our primary objective is timber growth and timber income, and our secondary is wildlife.
When John had an accident and broke his leg, it got harder to have cattle, run a cattle operation. And so that was kind of the beginning of the timber. Plus, we've always loved trees. So where he used to build fences, he started taking them down and planting trees.
This was all pasture land when we started And these were actually planted in January of 1992, and we had some tip moth damage and stem canker, and so we started to burn these trees at a rather an early age in an attempt to control the tip moth and stem canker. Well, the composition of our forest land, we're probably about 90% pine and 10% hardwood. The CRP program has been a wonderful program for us in terms that it allowed us to get into the timber industry, I'd say, really. We might not have been able to do that on our own personal basis, at least not the acreage that we needed to plant, but it's worked very well for us in terms of timber and wildlife. It was almost like a God-given opportunity that came along at that point in our lives. For our wildlife, we do winter plantings. In the fall, we'll plant clover, wheat, and some rye, and then in those same fields, we come back in the spring and no-till in, as you saw some of it today, some of the iron clay peas and grain sorghum. And then, of course, we've got the duck pond area, which is a flat area that leads to the river, and we were able to put a dam in there so that we can control the water. And that's a total of about 6 acres, and we're able to drain it in the early summer, late spring, early summer, and actually get in there and plant grain sorghum. We grew a lot of winter crops for cattle. We grew a lot of ryegrass and ran stocker cattle. So we had a lot of wildlife that came on the place from surrounding areas, but not much of it stayed on the place. I mean, we might go out and count 20 deer in a beautiful ryegrass pasture, but probably 18 of them came off the neighbors, you know. But once we started planting trees, then in the early stages of our plantations, we saw quite an increase in deer numbers. The ponds are stocked with bass and brim, and yes, they're recreational ponds. The kids and the grandkids enjoy coming and fishing, and we have some hunters that utilize the one pond. We try to take advantage of any opportunity to educate people about timber growth, timber management, the advantages of it. We've had groups such as our classroom in the forest that we did this last fall. We had the forestry camp here, the young participants from the forestry camp in 2005. And we try to make the property available to any group that wants to learn about forestry. My dad always taught us that you leave a place better than you find it, or you shouldn't have been there.
The property was composed from 2 family farms. It was purchased in 1819 by my great-great-granddaddy, Evan Denbo. They actually didn't move here till 1832. He married the adjoining landowner's daughter. He was a very smart man. We started converting timber in '83, and we've gone and replanted most of the stuff we've cut, plus we put all the marginal land in CRP, which consists of about probably 50 acres of CRP. And all the CRP has got wildlife openings and or food plots or boat. Most of them have both. Our timber ranges from 2 years old to some very mature longleaf stands and some very mature loblolly stands that are probably 30, 40 years old. We started burning our forest back in, I believe, 88. No, 86. The first burn, I just about burned the world up. But you learn, and you learn more from your mistakes in forestry than you do from what you do right. And of course, Mother Nature is real good because she takes care of you and covers your mistakes. We're really protecting our hardwoods. That's one of our main objectives. Number one, the price of hardwood's not that great, so I'm not going to give it away. We're doing a lot of irregular type cutting where we're getting the hills and the pine stands or the mixed pine stands, and we're leaving the draws and the hardwood areas uncut. We tried to be conservation minded and leave streets, streamside management zones, and think about wildlife, and that's our major objective is wildlife. We found that if you manage for wildlife, timber falls in with it, and that's pretty much the way me and Don and Hal run the farm.
When I was a little girl, if you saw a deer up in the land, we were just ecstatic, you know. You just saw very few deer when I was a teenager.
And what about now?
Oh, now they're just, you know, everywhere.
Tim, this is one of about 20 acres of food plots we have. This is one of our smaller ones. Most of our food plots are acre or better in size. This one's about 2/10 of an acre. It's an annual food plot, and it's planted to Tecumani monster mix, which is a makeup of clover and chicory. And we planted about a year and a half ago.
Try to manage our deer program, try to do it to where our wildlife will always be there for our children and our grandchildren.
As far as education on the place, we brought the 4th grade out here on the Alabama history. The year they take Alabama history, and of course they want us to let them see the Indian Mound, let them go pick up some arrowheads. Historical Society has come out here, and we've had two Treasure Forest Association meetings out here where we bring landowners, probably 50, 60 landowners come in. You do it 1 acre at a time, and that's what we try to stress to the landowners that don't have tractors and don't have equipment to work with. You just do it. You know, anybody can buy a spray tank. You can buy a four-wheeler. A lot of people have four-wheelers. You can buy spray tanks going four-wheelers. You can do, I mean, you got chainsaws, you got bush axes. You can manage your property. You know, what you get out of it, you get to watch the stuff evolve over a period of time, what you've done. And I go back and look at what we had in '83 or '4 when we took it over and where we're at now. And I just know so much more, and I've learned so much more, and you know, we just love the land.
When you can see the trees that you planted from seedlings, you know, grow up, and you know that it's there for this generation and for the generations to follow. I think that's, you know, I think you take pride in that.